Welcome to Popternative, where we dive into topical discussions from the worlds of pop culture, social media, and sports. Here is your host, Peter Remoliotis, aka PD Beats.
PD Beats here from Popternative, speaking to Tiffany Lonsdale about season 5 of Snowfall on FX. Welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, PD. So happy to be here.
It's exciting, and we're going to get into the show and everything, but, storytelling, acting, when did that kind of start for you? Did you know you wanted to do it? Did it kind of just happen? I'm curious about that a little bit.
It's funny because when I get asked this question, it comes at different angles, and it's both. I knew I wanted to do it, but I didn't pursue it until after university.
Yep.
And I had a few jobs here and there and loved working out in the real world, but ultimately felt called to go into the creative arts. I just didn't really have the confidence at the time to pursue it.
Yeah.
It felt like it was what other people did. And I loved watching telly and films and theater. And I was always so invigorated by it. And I loved all the stories and escapism and imagination. And then one day it sort of just dawned on me that if I don't pursue it now, I'm really going to regret it for the rest of my life.
Yeah, I feel there's going to come a point where, you're doing a lot of self-reflection and you're trying to figure out what you got to do. And then, you're just like, this is what I want to do. I've had a lot of people answer similar to that, Tiffany, where they're kind of like, there was a point where it was kind of like, I had to make a decision and I went for it.
Yeah, it's like now or never. And because when that whisper turns into a roar, it's your responsibility to pursue that, whatever it is.
Absolutely.
To at least experiment and see.
No, absolutely. No, it's so great. And we're talking about Snowfall on FX. And I love this show so much. And it's crazy that there's already been 5 seasons of it. And we talked a little bit before we started. I mean, it's one thing when it's like you join like a show for like its 2nd season or its 3rd season, but you're joining it in season 5 when, there's been like 4 seasons of like established relationships, chaotic things that happen. You know what I mean? What's that kind of mindset like where you're kind of joining like 4 seasons later, so to speak?
It was intimidating and also quite exciting. That was 40 episodes and 5 years of all of those beautiful actors and crew becoming a family on and off set.
Mm-hmm.
And where I join is sort of out of left field anyway, because I'm not really in touch with a lot of the other characters in the show, which is unique in and of itself. So I think because of that, I was able to just sort of slot in without too much hesitation as to how does this work, because it starts to unfold as the story progresses, and that helped a lot.
Did you notice, because there's a lot kind of happening with the show, I mean, the drugs are obviously something everyone thinks about, but do sometimes, like I'm watching the show sometimes, and because it really focuses sometimes on like these relationships with certain characters, I sometimes forget that I'm watching a show about drug dealing.
Yeah, that's one of the beauties of the show, and that's why it's resonated with so many people over so many years. I mean, the fact that we're now in season 5 and we've been greenlit for a season 6 means a lot. And at the core of this show, it is about love and family and relationships and all the downsides of that, betrayal and distrust and pain and death. And the drugs, of course, are a huge factor in that. That's part of the real story out in the world that existed in history, and part of how the story, continues on through the different ages with all of those characters.
Well, it's interesting because, I call it like the tale of 2 shows, and there's a lot of shows like that. Like Snowfall is one of those, but there's a lot of like shows that have to do with sports, where in one regard it's like about a team, but then like you'll forget it's about sports because it's about life and other things. And I feel like there's so many shows about that, like that. Like FX has had a lot of those, but specifically with this one, like You're the Worst was one I watched on FX, and it was one of those shows where it was like coming of age comedy. There's a lot of things happening, and it was like about people working in like arts, basically, if you think about it, because one was like working as PR for a radio show network, and then the other was writing books. But it was then just also, you forgot about that aspect of it. It was literally just about a love story. So it was like, I felt like I'm watching two shows a little bit. With a lot of content, you feel like you're watching two things at once.
And isn't that indicative of life?
Yeah.
Because we can we can say that about so many facets of everyday life, whether you're in the arts or not.
Yep.
If you go into an office and you are dealing with something personally and you have a connection with someone at work that you can even talk to for 5 minutes about that, it's within the context of work, but it's become more personalized. And I think that's why it resonates. The fact that you can pick that up so easily, even though it is subtle in some other shows. And in Snowfall, obviously, it ebbs and flows as to how it hits you.
It does, absolutely. I find it interesting because if I would talk to, the showrunners, the writers, the directors of Snowfall, they're going to tell me this. They're going to say one of the main kind of points every time like a season. So like they got renewed for season 6. The obvious kind of mindset and goals right off the bat, Tiffany, is how do we make season 6 better than season 5? I feel like that's kind of the overall goal here and there, right? What are other things that come to mind for you kind of as an actor when you think of like a new season, or you think of like season 5 compared to season 4? Is it also like kind of just like developing the characters and the arcs? Like what goes through your mind with that? I'm curious.
Yes, it's a bit of everything. I would say digging deeper for the truth comes to mind.
Yeah.
As an actor specifically, that's what I look for in the
Yep.
character, in the overarching story, and how do I fit into that? Because what we're being asked to do, let's say on the show like Snowfall, some of those actions and some of the things that are being said aren't what we would do in real life.
Yep.
And we have to be very truthful about that in every moment, because that's what the character is doing.
No,
And so I
absolutely.
think it's just peeling back the layers and really getting to the truth of it.
The storytelling in the show is fantastic. The behind the camera component of it, how it looks, how it's shot. They just hit it out of the park. When you get to work on a show like that just looks so good and just has amazing writing and everything, does it excite you or like intrigue you to possibly like go behind the camera more and maybe write and direct and produce, or is like acting something you're really focusing on?
It's so funny you're asking this because I just watched your interview with Rupert Evans. And so tapping into those questions, I
He loves directing, by the way, if you
oh,
haven't.
I saw that. I was ready to direct just because he was so enthusiastic about it. I really appreciated what he said about there are some actors in this business who really focus on the acting, and then there are others who are very curious about the other facets of it. And
Yeah.
I would say writing, I'm an extroverted introvert. So for me, I feel very comfortable sitting here at my desk with my music going and, old school pen and paper. And so there's always an element of storytelling that I create on a daily basis. And I'm curious as to where that will lead me in the future.
Oh, 100%. And I feel like it's interesting. You look at like with my show, with Popternative, I wear many hats, but I kind of have to, Tiffany. Like I kind of don't have a choice. Like I'm doing the interviews, I'm editing, I'm posting, I'm like pitching, like I'm doing everything. A lot of people feel like they're kind of in a position where like when they have their own projects, like they're gonna star in it, they're gonna write it, they're gonna direct it. I mean, are we at the point in like storytelling where like we're kind of thrown in and we don't really have a choice at times, I feel like?
Yes, I think we may well be. And I really believe with the advent of all of us having, a computer in our hands, basically with our phones, what used to be only some people having access to equipment or education around it or just the time to create has now been gifted to all of us in some capacity,
Yeah.
and it's what we really want to do with it, even if it's just for fun.
Mhm.
I think it is like it must be so fulfilling for you to wear all of those hats, because at the end of the day you can truly own everything that you've done.
But you know what? It's like there's only so much time in the day.
That's
I'm
true.
just saying.
That's true.
Like it's a lot, and I feel like you got to go in with it's funny, a teacher told me a long time ago, and I kind of it's a thing that I kind of take all the time, is you have to do it, and you can change passion with like love, but you have to do it with passion or don't do it at all, because if your passion will allow you to do a lot of things, if that makes sense, you know what I mean?
Absolutely. I think passion can drive a lot of what we do. It can get us through the ups and downs, which are inevitable in any career.
Yep.
That's just how we're wired as humans, to have ups and downs and get through it. So if you have the passion, I think also matched with that is the discipline. If you can just hold yourself accountable in everything that you're doing. So for example, when you're scheduling interviews, if you schedule a month out, then you're committing to do that. And
Yep.
you don't have any excuse because other people are making time and schedules change. And so it's passion and discipline, I think, can really lead to beautiful creations.
100%. And this right now, what I'm about to say is more of kind of like a statement and a fact that I'd like you to like comment on rather than like a straight up question. But
Okay.
um I mean, the amount of like we are in the golden age of content. You look at all the streaming services and all the networks, it's unbelievable. And I feel like for the viewer, it's a chance to discover. I think it's a discover aspect of it. They could find new shows and everything. For storytellers, I think it's just simply just a land of opportunity.
Yes, it's quite extraordinary actually, because family and friends who aren't in the business are always commenting on, have you seen this show? And I would have never seen it if I hadn't subscribed to this, or so and so hadn't posted about it. And then, part of my job is to be watching all of these shows
Yeah,
and movies, and it's it's overwhelming.
me too,
There's
by the
so
way.
much. I can't even keep up with it, and I would say I give it a pretty good
You
go.
feel
And
guilty at times too, eh? Where like someone's like, "Oh, did you watch that?" Right? You're like,
I know. And like you were saying earlier, it's the worst on FX. I'm thinking, "Oh my gosh, I'm on an FX show. Does that mean I need to watch every FX show that's out there, which is also then on Hulu?" And it's like, "Oh my gosh, I can't keep up."
Yep.
But as you said, for storytellers, and including the actors involved in those stories, really the landscape is wide and far, because we can now, we're still generally not going into the casting rooms right now
Yeah.
for auditioning. So we are able to send a tape, if I'm in LA, to a New York casting director about an international production. And
Mhm.
that has changed the landscape.
And to kind of add to that, it's funny because I get it if it's like a project that someone did like 20 years ago, right? Like we do a lot of interviews with people that are known for something they did a long time ago, right? And they got new projects they want to talk about and everything. But people obviously like bring up certain projects, when they were like they did. And it's one of those things where like a lot of them are super cool to talk about. Obviously, you're there to talk about their new project, but they're cool talking about it because I feel like it's a little like, for example, with you, right? If you have a movie coming out, right, or an indie or something, people will say, "Oh, it's Tiffany Lonsdale from Snowfall." That's awesome. It's like used as like leverage, you know what I mean? A little bit. Like, have you ever thought about that? Like the marketing aspect of it too. Like, you want to bring up past projects.
Yes. If I don't have past projects, then I would say my experience has been somewhat limited. So
Yeah.
the fact that I do get to bring up past projects is exciting for me, because of the stories that were told, but also I will say on a personal level, the memories I have from shooting,
Yeah.
where we shot and with the cast and the crew and what was happening then in my life. And watching Snowfall has been really fun because it's all aired, right? So we've
Yeah.
done 10 episodes now, but not that long ago we
No.
finished it.
Yeah.
So I'm watching it and I was saying to my friends the other day, like, "Oh, I remember on set that day what happened," and all these kinds of things. So for me, it's a very fulfilling experience to look back and remember that.
Oh, absolutely. No, it's so crazy, and it's true for sure. And before we wrap up very quickly, when they watch Snowfall, regardless, like you can maybe tailor this towards season 5, but like, what do you hope the audience gets out of watching Snowfall when they have a chance to, Tiffany? Like takeaway
I
wise.
I hope the audience can see that even when you have lots of money and you feel on top of the world, that actually it can still be as challenging as what it was before that. And I think it's allowing each character to go through their own process of growing in life.
Yep.
And I just think that's important to recognize that everyone makes mistakes, everyone grows, and everyone can learn a lesson and move forward with positivity. Although at the end of
Yeah.
the finale, there's a lot happening. So I think it's going to be pretty epic going into season 6.
I just feel like the roller coaster emotions of TV shows. We can't deal with it, Tiffany, these days. I feel like we can't. Like, there's so much going on in shows.
Our
Like I have to
nervous
mentally
systems.
prepare to like watch shows.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed week by week as
Yep.
opposed to binge watching because I think it allows for the conversation as well and you absorb it all.
I like both, and people get mad at me when I say that because
understand
I
that.
like both.
I
I think
understand that.
I think there's a place in the world where both of them can exist, in my opinion.
I agree, and I think I remember on a previous interview with someone you were saying that you love horror films.
Love horror films.
So my friend was just talking about Fresh.
On Hulu.
Okay, so just so you know, I cannot watch horror. It's not for me, but I appreciate it. And so I'm wondering, will you just binge watch a bunch of new horror, and how does that affect you?
So I do, and they're making them scare. I'm telling you right now, they're making them scarier because there's a few of them that I've watched. Because I watch a lot, especially like in October. I do one a night in October,
Oh my
right? So
gosh.
but like sometimes I'll do double headers. So sometimes it's like I'm watching 50 horror movies in October, right? But like there's been some lately, and some of them aren't like straight up. There's even been some thrillers
Right.
that have been like, because they're realistic and they're like the genre is just changing towards these like uncomfortable conversations between two people at a dinner party where it's like, why did you say that? And it's like, oh my goodness, because that's about to happen. And you think about it for a while and then you have the lights on before you go to bed. And that's basically
Yeah.
how it is. So to answer your question, it's tough to binge them in a row. Yeah. But I do it anyway because that's who I
I mean, I'm not binge watching horror. I'm binge watching like Bridgerton season 2. So luckily it's different, and I can turn off the lights quite thankfully at night and not freak out
Yeah,
about it.
you'd much rather just listen to the string quartet versions of popular songs on Spotify than watch
How
horror movies.
great is
So
that?
good.
It's so good.
So good. It is so good. No, it's amazing. Tiffany, this was such a great time chatting with you. Thank you so much for coming on Popternative.
Thank you, PD.
Yeah, so FX season 5, Snowfall.
Yes.
They can check that out.
Yes, also on Hulu.
Yep, absolutely. And where can people follow you on social media to keep update with everything?
I'm only on Instagram at Tiffany Lonsdale.
Amazing. This has been Popternative, youtube.com/Popternative for previous episodes. Until next time, this is Tiffany Lonsdale, which you can catch on Snowfall on FX and Hulu. And PD Beats signing off.
Thank you for tuning in to Popternative. Make sure to check out our past episodes of Popternative on YouTube. Be sure to like Popternative on Facebook and follow us on Twitter.
This has been an Autograph Communications production.